And so I want to bring in a minute Nicole Abanto, and she is going to talk to us about an otter point of view, her amazing work in the Peruvian Amazon to study one of the most amazing and incredible creatures on this planet. And I don't say that lightly. The giant otter is super, super cool. I'm so excited to bring her in. And so thank you guys so much for tuning in. And thank you so much, Nicole, for joining us today. Welcome into the broadcast.
Hi, Jesse. Thank you very much. Very happy to be here.
Yeah, so great to have you, and I'm excited to dive in. I've already seen your first slide. I got a little sneak peek before we got underway, and so let's roll into this presentation and blow some people's minds.
Okay, sure. So I'll just start sharing my screen.
Perfect.
Just a second.
And
okay, so
good, perfect.
So hi everyone. Thank you. I'm very glad to be here. And today my talk is called An Otter Point of View. So basically, I'm going to be telling you a little bit about myself, my work with giant otters, and about the work I've been doing with the Giant Otter Conservation Program for the past 4 years. It's going to be mostly about the most recent research I've done, which is about habitat for giant otters in human-modified landscapes in Madre de Dios. And this is actually the first time I'm sharing my results with a larger audience than just my family and my 2 neighbors, which have been bothering about my results. So a little bit about myself is I have a bachelor's degree in biology from La Universidad Nacional Agraria de La Molina, which is in Lima, where I'm from. I also have a postgraduate diploma in international wildlife conservation practices from the University of Oxford. I define myself as a conservation scientist and practitioner. And also last year, I co-founded with a friend of mine an NGO called Comuna Ciencia, which aims to enhance scientific education in schools in Peru. However, most of my work before I started the NGO, I am currently now a science teacher in a high school in Lima. But before this, most of my work was done in research in the Amazon rainforest. And for the past 4 years, as I mentioned, I've been working with giant otters. So just to give you a short intro into giant otters, which I definitely agree with Jesse, and I already like you more for that. They're really, really cool animals, and we're going to be talking a lot about them right now. But for those of you who might not heard of them very much, because maybe you don't have otters in your area, otters are mustelids, so they're in the same group as all badgers, skunks, wolverines, etc. Basically just long-bodied animals. And they are also carnivores and predators. In the case of giant otters, they eat lots of fish. They're very picky about their food. They don't eat a lot of other items in their diet. They just mostly fish, and large ones at least. And they're semi-aquatic freshwater species, and they're found in most of South American river basins. So all the way from Colombia to Paraguay. And very recently, we had good news from Argentina, where they thought to be extinct, but now they have found them again. They have rediscovered giant otters in a portion of Argentina, so their extension is now being extended. That's really good news. But however, unfortunately, still for most of the South American region, the giant otter is endangered. And this is basically due because of population reduction in the past due to heavy hunting. They were heavily hunted for their pelts, which is very good, warm, and waterproof. However, nowadays, since they are endangered species and they're also large predators, they are considered to be good conservation ambassadors. So basically why I work with otters, other than they're very cool, is that as carnivores, as large predators, they have an important role in the ecosystem. And they're very susceptible to changes in their environment. So when there's human activities, you can see the effects of these in large predators. They're also linked to the biodiversity in an area. So where you find giant otters, you know there's high biodiversity and high abundance of fish. And of course, they also support high levels of biodiversity. So as large predators, they're on the top of the food web. So when you remove large predators from an ecosystem, then you have an imbalance in the whole food web, which can cause an imbalance in the ecosystem. But also, most importantly, conservation ambassadors are known for having umbrella and charisma values, high values for umbrella and charisma. So umbrella means basically that when you study giant otters or you protect the environment of a giant otter, you're actually protecting an entire ecosystem. In the case of the rainforest, you're talking about rivers and lakes, which not just sustain aquatic species, but then also other animals that depend on fish as part of their diet. And charisma values, well, all otters are very charismatic. Even if you consider the giant otter to be a little funny looking compared to the other otters, you cannot deny that they have a lot of charm. And let me illustrate also how these characteristics of otters make them important for the ecosystem and good conservation environments. So in Madre de Dios, where I work, giant otters live in these type of lakes, which are called oxbow lakes, and they are formed by part of the river being separated from the main channel, and these lakes are created in the shape of an oxbow. That's why they're called that way. But in order for these lakes to have a giant otter group living inside of them, they have to be very biodiverse and very abundant when it comes to fish. So let me just show you how this is true by using elephants. Okay. So we know the giant otters eat a lot of fish, and one giant otter will need about 10% of its own weight in fish. That would be like around 3 kilos approximately daily. So if you think that giant otters are social animals and they live in groups, then the average size of the group is 6 giant otters. That means that in a year, this 6 group will need to take up approximately 6.5 tons of fish from one of these lakes. And why I'm using elephants? Just because if you cannot think of how much would 1 ton of fish be, then just think that your average African elephant weighs about a ton. So in 1 year, these 6 otters will be the equivalent of 6 1-ton elephants and half of that. So that is quite a lot of biomass to be taken from the lakes. So just imagine if otters were to disappear from this area, that amount of fish, and there's a lot of carnivore fishes there that could create an unbalance on the ecosystem, making a collapse in a lake. However, also, otters don't use these lakes in the same way. This is something that we have been seeing while we were studying giant otters, and is that in this the entire length of this lake, we can see them sometimes in the areas marked in red, are the areas that they fish, that they do most of their fishing, and of course eating. Then the blue areas are areas that they use for social behaviors. So otters are very social. They engage in a lot of grooming, so just grooming each other. They also play a lot. Part of their playing is important to teach the cubs how to fish. And there's also areas where they are more protective. So otters have this behavior that is called periscoping, where they will pull half of their body out of the water and make strong sounds at you if you are trespassing the area. So part of the question was, why are otters using parts of the lake differently? And it's not just because of the fish. I mean, fish move all around the lake. So what are the other features of the habitat that make this? So what is the otter point of view regarding their habitat? And this is one of the best detailed maps that we have on giant otter distribution. However, if you notice, it's just the pink area is just the actual range. And if you notice, it's just very general. When in reality, otters will only be found in the places where you have these blue lines, which are rivers and lakes, or in wetlands. So here, I would like to make a short break on the Otter project and talk a little bit about my journey in conservation in the rainforest. So most of my work since I started 6 or 7 years ago was done here in this part of the Amazon in Peru, in the southern part. And this is called the region of Madre de Dios, which is known for its biodiversity. So it has large predators like jaguars that can be seen when you go through the rivers. It has huge canopy trees that can reach up to 60 meters, and a lot of monkey species like the woolly monkey and the spider monkey, and it's one of the places with most biodiversity of butterflies and moths. So basically, it's a very rich and beautiful place, and most of my work was done at the beginning inside protected areas. So this is what I was used to working with before I started the Giant Otter Conservation Program. This is what I would wake up to, this is what I would leave in the morning, and when I needed to travel by boat, this is what I would see. But then when we started the Giant Otter Conservation Program was to address an environmental issue in Madre de Dios, and this was gold mining. So artisanal gold mining is the common way of extracting gold from the rivers in Madre de Dios, is what is causing the deforestation of a lot of areas. And when it comes to losing forests, we know its effects on biodiversity, on terrestrial biodiversity, but there's not a lot of information and good links to how it affects the aquatic environment. And we have to consider that these are systems that are completely connected to each other, and whatever happens in one area of the river will be carried down the current or will be carried by migrational fish. So it was important to understand how this was affecting giant otters and other wildlife, because then at the end, it was about the protection of this entire environment. And using giant otters was a good, let's say, a strategy for conservation. It gives a lot of information about the quality of the environment. So coming back to the giant otter conservation program and the gold mining issue is, first of all, I need to mention, this is a disclaimer, that I am not against gold mining, although it has a strong effect on wildlife and the environment, because really there are a lot of more variables at play in Madre de Dios regarding gold mining. For starters, gold mining is increasing significantly, mostly due to the increasing gold price globally. So it's more of a global issue than just in Madre de Dios. And there is legal gold mining, it's ideally it's strictly regulated. It only happens in gold mining concessions. It's impossible to mine very close to water bodies, but as you can see in this picture, which I didn't have to travel much to get it, you can basically see it. Even if you go by airplane on top of Madre de Dios, you see how gold mining happens in rivers, and it's supposedly not allowed to use mercury when it's legal. However, more than 90% of gold mining or gold extraction in Madre de Dios is illegal. It's done illegally. There are 40 tons of mercury dumped a year on Madre de Dios. Already, 78% of the population of Madre de Dios, the human population, have high mercury levels. And just between 2017 and 2018, over 184 kilometers of forests were wiped out to become mines. And also, just for you to have an idea of the size of that, is about the size of the city of Milan. However, I do have to say that there are a lot of different variables here at play. Like, for example, it's not just greed and people looking for gold in Madre de Dios. There's a long history of inequality in the region. There are not enough job opportunities. The people in the region have been neglected. There's low governance issues and a lot of different things that I could go into on a complete different talk just to discuss gold mining in Madre de Dios. But let's just focus back to the Otter Conservation Program. So this is the map of Madre de Dios, and as you can see, that's the range, the effect of deforestation that is, of course, linked to the interoceanic highway. And here to the right, we just have how when gold mining starts in an area, it just very quickly spreads and then is abandoned without having any type of recuperation in the area. So this is where the Giant Otter Conservation Program comes in, and we are comparing areas inside protected areas in Madre de Dios. We're comparing lakes with otters inside protected areas to other lakes in the Bajo Madre de Dios area, which is also known as La Pampa, where there's a lot of gold mining, but there's also a lot of otter groups there. So we were able to make a comparison between these two areas. So what happens is that otters are very picky animals when it comes to habitat. So we don't really know what are the fact features of the lakes that they prefer more than others. And there are really big variations, but they're at a really fine scale. For example, these differences in vegetation in the lake cannot be seen in satellite images. And this video is just to show you basically what you would do in this kind of studies is use satellite images to describe the habitat of one animal. But in this case, the resolution that we have for some lakes is very, very low. So if you zoom in, you cannot really make much of a difference of what's happening there. This is based on the pixel size. So what we did in the giant otter conservation program is we got creative, because big animals need creative methods. So we started using drones to take a lot of pictures at 180 meters above surface of the lakes. And then we used a software to stitch all of the images together and do a spatial correction and create maps. So these really fine resolution maps are the ones that allowed us to have more information about the changes in the habitat of otters. Now, these lakes are relatively small. The largest doesn't reach more than 100 hectares, and their average is around 20. So the UAV images, which are basically drone images, are working perfectly to map human modification on these lakes. For example, this is an active mine that it was operational when we were surveying this lake. And this is an abandoned mine also inside this lake. And these kind of differences would not appear in a satellite image because this would still be covered in green. And this entire area would be 1 pixel, and it would just show that there's forest cover. So the whole outline of the project, I'm going to go through it very fast so I don't bore you. So we can go into more otter pictures and lake pictures. It's just the fun part, which happened around 2018 and 2019. It was just going to the field. We would travel in this boat for like a month or month and a half, living on it. We did 5-day surveys in the 21 lakes, and at least we went in 2 different locations to the lakes. We got the location and the group size accounts of the giant otter groups that we found. And then we also got the collection of all of the drone images for the 21 lakes, which resulted in these maps, which really fine scale. They're just your basically RGB image, so the image that has red, green, and blue. However, drones also gave us good information for elevation models and Barry index, which is just basically a vegetation health map. And then the second part was creating these land cover classifications in order to identify the different types of habitat that they have, like the variations in their habitat. And this was done basically using a machine learning program when somebody was teaching, I was teaching algorithm how to classify the pixels in the lakes. And then this just like extrapolated to all of the lakes. So this was very useful since it was too many pixels for each lake. So this is a little bit how the process looks. We have the drone map, which is the RGB image. We have the digital terrain and the vegetation health index. And the result is this land cover classification that we see here at the bottom right. And this map has 5 categories, but then I started with 12. Just they kept getting shorter. Eventually, I realized less in these kind of cases is much better than having too many. And then the second part was just doing the models for habitat suitability. So to see what, based on our data, what were the places that otters were selecting more often, to have an idea of what areas are more likely to be used by otters in other lakes. So this was basically 1 year of me just running a lot of codes and then running the model and then fixing the code again to get or habitat suitability models for giant otters. So this is the result of all of the program team effort. And we can finally have here on the right what it is, a habitat suitability model. So it shows us areas in darker green that are more likely to be used by otters. In this case, this was a lake in the affected area by gold mining. And we can finally say where we can most likely find otters there. But then what about the whole difference? What about the areas in the protected part and the areas affected by gold mining? was there a difference in the habitat suitability of these lakes? And just in general lines, these are the lakes inside the protected areas. And this is backwards, so I'm sorry. So now suitability is like higher suitability is in red. So there are highly suitable lakes, like for example, this really big lake here, which is mostly red and yellow, just like there are unsuitable lakes in the protected areas. And when we compare them to certain lakes in the Madre de Dios region, in the La Pampa, or like the ones that are affected by gold mining, so some of them are doing very badly in suitability values. However, other lakes in the mined area are still really good in suitability for giant otters. So as a whole group, we cannot really say that there's a marked difference due to gold mining. However, for particular lakes, there is clearly an evidence of how suitability is decreasing. And some of the things that we found that otters prefer are, for example, the size of the patch of water that they need. So you could be thinking that maybe they need large areas with water to survive and do their fishing, but actually doing the scale selection, we found that about 20 meters of lake, like open water, is good enough for them to be fishing. That floating vegetation, so sometimes when the lake gets covered by other vegetation, is not that important for them. And then that what is a really good feature for them is having a canopy from trees really close by to the lakes. So gold mining, by removing lakes that create the boundary or the edge of the lakes, they're actually decreasing the habitat suitability for giant otters in the lakes. So some of the takeaways from the results are that these results, these maps, can work as guidance for future conservation measures in Madre de Dios. Also, the drone technology is a replicable tool for conservation in aquatic animals. And I consider that the only way for successful conservation is definitely including the human component. It's not just about reducing gold mining or eliminating it. It's about working in better conditions and having better regulations. And also let's maintain optimism in the conservation dialogue. It is very important to remark that, things are happening, things are moving forward. We are not just like the best that everybody says humans are, but we're actually a stake as well, and we're also a solution for the conservation problems. And I want to say thank you to all of the programs that were supporting the conservation program of giant otters, Cochacacho Biological Station, the San Diego Zoo Institute for Research, the University of Oxford and Wild Crew, and also especially to my family and friends for all the support. And I want to invite you all to go to Colors for Conservation, which is where I got most of the art. A special thanks to Christina Ward for always letting me use her beautiful giant otter pictures. And just to close, a short video of otters being badass and driving away a caiman from their den. So that's just a group of giant otters that are about maybe 5 of them that are taking on a caiman that was getting too close to their den. So they're just protecting their young.
That was fantastic, Nicole. For a person who started this by saying that you've only told your family and close friends, that was actually one of the more fun presentations I've seen yet. So thank you for that. And for highlighting the art too, I was going to say I want delightful otters with umbrellas in my slide decks from now on. That was fantastic.
Yeah, that's Christina Ward's art is amazing. I really recommend that you visit her page.
I will absolutely check that out. And by the way, you are also the first person in our 60 hours of broadcasting to say that you're going to end your broadcast with a badass video of your creature. So thank you. That was like, it's true. They're so cool. Like, this is the thing. I've been loving natural history documentaries since I was a little kid. I'm sure a lot of our audience has. And only recently have I started seeing giant otters in films with like caimans and jaguars and all these other things. They're a beefy animal. You don't want to mess with an otter. They're very, very cool. So thank you for showcasing such a neat creature. And one of the big takeaways for me, and one thing that I absolutely loved in your presentation, is that you said you're not against gold mining. You're against illegal gold mining that impacts ecosystems in a negative way. And I think that this is such an important message and cohesive takeaway from this program, is that for conservation to succeed, it does need the buy-in of all different kinds of people doing all sorts of different work in these amazing places. And so I really thank you and commend you for highlighting that. That was really special. Is there a next step? You did such dedicated research to bring this to life, to showcase all the stuff that you shared today. What do we need to do next in this region to make sure that otters and humans can coexist as peacefully as possible?
Well, there are different ways to approach it. Basically, just like in your average day, just take better choices in what you use. For example, it's not a bad way to start by demanding the companies that make certain products that use gold to specify where they're getting the gold. The gold extracted from Madre de Dios is washed and sold in the legal market. Yeah. So it's very important that you make an effort to track where the gold that you are using comes from. Also, just by not using gold jewelry, you're sort of doing a good impact there. It's about 1/6 of the gold production used in jewelry. Wow. And just basically sharing the knowledge and sharing the word, and even if it's just small changes in your life, they can have a great impact in Madre de Dios. And yeah, the next step would be just this paper is aiming to get published very soon, and definitely to keep working with the park rangers and the conservation NGOs in Madre de Dios, sharing the results.
Well, I look very forward to reading those papers, and I love that you highlighted a message that, again, so many of our speakers have been sharing. Be careful, take note and be mindful of what you buy, and don't waste things. That seems to be the essential message, whether it comes to climate change, ocean plastics, saving species worldwide. It's such a simple thing that we can all do at home. It's something that I've started doing in my own life in the last few years as a result of sort of stories like this. And so I think that that's a really great takeaway. So Nicole, thank you so much for joining us today. Time flies and you're having fun, so we're going to head to another speaker, but I do want to encourage you. You highlighted Wild Crew at the end of your program. We've had several Wild Crew speakers on for our fantastic program. And if you want to unmute yourself, I'll say a quick farewell. And thank you so much for joining us today.
Bye. Thank you.